Dank echt die lagang. I'm happy to see you. Nagatsi hinu had ang. My Haida name is Fox, and welcome to my independent study in Alaskan Haida language and etymology. So, if you're here, presumably you know a little bit about at least the Haida language or where Haida Gwaii is located, but in case you do not, when we talk about Haida Gwaii in this class, we're talking about the Queen Charlotte Islands, which are off the northern Pacific coast of Canada and right below the southern tip of southeast Alaska. So in Haida, there are two predominant dialects. There's Northern Haida and Southern Haida, and we're going to be getting into those a little bit more in depth here in a minute. But before we talk about those, I want to discuss the different Haida orthographies and how they have affected Haida language learning. So, when we talk about an orthography, what we're talking about is a way of writing down a language, the symbols we use to relate to the sounds of a language, right? And so there have been multiple different orthographies of Haida written, and these have not always been a positive experience for Alaska Native people or Haida people specifically. So, basically, over the past 100 years or so, anthropologists and linguists have been trying to document indigenous cultures and indigenous languages that have rapidly become more and more endangered as time has gone on. So, as these anthropologists and linguists attempt to record information, they don't always do it with the end goal being to share this information with Alaskan Native people themselves, right? There's a strong tendency to take data from indigenous communities and sequester it in museums and institutions like universities and such. So basically, there has not been a good relationship between researchers and indigenous communities up until relatively recently. And so we're trying to, repair some of that damage by dealing respectfully with these issues. So recently, there has been more orthographies written which are accessible and comprehensible to a lay person as opposed to someone that's used to working with linguistic symbols, right? So overall, what the takeaway is from that is that we need better resources and better access to early learning for Haida and for other Alaska Native languages. So some of the best resources that we have for Haida that we're going to be using in this class is first the Dictionary of Alaskan Haida by Dr. Jordan Lachler. This is an excellent resource for Haida language, and the introduction deals with some of the differences between Northern and Southern Haida, which we're going to be talking about today, okay? So it also has beautiful cover art, if you can appreciate it. Also, I'm going to be using in the future the Alaskan Haida Phrasebook, and this is by Erma Lawrence. Also beautiful cover art. It has excellent cultural information in it and a lot of common Haida phrases, so you can learn a lot about grammar and such from this book and what are just like colloquialisms, basically. So both of these two books are available as free PDFs from the Sealaska Heritage Institute, and those will be included in the description below. So please pick those up if you're interested in following along, either the PDF or buy them, because we want to support Native communities as much as we possibly can. So carrying on, The first thing that I want to talk about today is, in terms of Haida, is the linguistic emergency that currently exists in Alaska. So early on in my bachelor's, I was taking a Haida class, and I had the opportunity to contribute to requesting that the Alaska State Legislature and Governor Bill Walker passed House Concurrent Resolution 19, or HCR 19. And what HCR 19 is basically a declaration for Alaskan Native languages being endangered in Alaska that aims to promote and preserve all 20 recognized indigenous languages in the state. And it directs the state education commissioner to work with partners to promote indigenous languages in public education. Also, it encourages the use of traditional Alaska Native place names on public signs. So the reason this is important is because using Alaska Native place names on signs normalizes the indigenous language. It creates more immersion and exposure, and it also repairs some of the cultural erasure that has happened over the past 60 odd years in Alaska's history, where non-natives have moved into the state and renamed native locations with non-native names. The best example of this is Denali, the tall one, the high one, which was previously called Mount McKinley and has since returned to the native name. Usually these native names are important, not just because they, recall some person, such as Mountain McKinley refers to like the conquest of an individual. Native names tend to refer to natural features, Denali being the high one. They often can tell us a lot about the environment, the weather, and the people and animals that are in a given area. So it's important to preserve the place names simply for ecological reasons, not to mention the important cultural implications of changing the traditional names of an area. So I'm not going to get too much further into that, but suffice to say that the resolutions of HCR 19 under Governor Bill Walker are not necessarily being upheld by the current administration in Alaska. So it's incumbent upon Alaskans and voters and citizens in general to uphold these expectations so that we can improve the language situation in the state. So I would like to talk a little bit more about Haida and about some of the things that make Haida language learning difficult and critical right now. So I want to talk about mutual intelligibility and Haida. But first, we probably kind of need to define what is mutual intelligibility. So mutual intelligibility is a relationship between languages or dialects in which speakers of different but related varieties can readily understand each other without prior familiarity or special effort. So in Haida, we have two predominant dialects, as I previously mentioned. We have Skidegate Haida, which is an amalgamation of the Southern Haida dialects located mainly on Haida Gwaii. We also have Masset Haida, which is on the northern island, and we have Alaskan Haida, which together with Masset are amalgamations of the northern dialects of Haida. Alaskan Haida is what we are primarily going to be working with in this class. It is mainly spoken in Heidelberg, Kasan, and Ketchikan in southern Alaska. There are minor differences between Masset and Alaskan Haida dialects, but they are largely intelligible to one another, whereas Masset and Alaskan Haida are not mutually intelligible with Skidegate Haida. So essentially, we're not only working with a critically endangered language here, we are also working with an critically endangered dialect of a critically endangered language. So, in order to illustrate some of the differences that I'm talking about here between Skidegate, Masset, and Alaskan Haida, I'm going to go over some southern and northern words with you. So, we have this word Gwaii in southern Haida. Gwaii, it means mass of clouds. But that same word, Gwaii, in southern Haida, in northern Haida is pronounced Gwaii, okay? The h has been dropped in northern Haida. We also have the word stihagang in southern Haida, to be angry, okay? But that same term in northern Haida is pronounced stigang, okay? So the h has been dropped again in northern Haida. So if we're talking about specifically northern Haida, we have what are called extended and contracted vowels. An example of this would be tuk, okay? We have the word tuk, which in Haida is isdagan, but then the contracted version would be istgan, tuk. So the da in isdagan has been dropped, the a has been dropped, leaving only the istgun, you see. So the vowel contraction is much more common in Alaskan Haida than in Masset or in Skidegate. So there has been a lot of work done to combat the linguistic emergency in Alaska by tribal organizations and native groups all over the state. There are a lot of different initiatives going on, some of which you can learn about in the description down below through my links. But one of the things that I would like to talk about is language learning environments and how they are different in what we think of as like a Western classroom versus traditional native ways of learning. So traditionally in native communities, you would have the young people being taught by a whole variety of different ages, by parents and uncles and aunties and elders. And, you know, it takes a village. This is the kind of phrase we're familiar with, right? It is very, very different from our Western mindset of what schooling is, where you go and you sit in a classroom and you largely learn by rote. So, in an attempt to reclaim a lot of indigenous language, Alaskan groups, native groups, are creating what are called language nests, which are immersion areas where whole extended families can come together. Babies and toddlers and elders can all be together, experiencing language together, even if they're not full speakers yet, getting exposed to language, hearing it and learning it, you know, a little bit passively. And it's shown that when we learn this way, it improves both our understanding in the new language as well as in our own language. Comprehension raises with the water level, so to speak. When the water rises, we all float together. So I would just like, as we go through this class, as we learn Haida vocabulary, for us to think about this as a language nest and communicate as much as you can. This issue is not getting as much attention as it truly deserves. And, you know, I believe that as we increase our bilingualism, we also increase our cultural literacy. You know, we need to make these things a priority because they produce positive effects in our society. And there is so much depth in the Haida language that can be retained, that can teach us about the human experience and about ecology. So that's my mission here with this class, and to create more language exposure. Don't forget to subscribe. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the Haida alphabet, what sounds there are, and we're really going to be starting with some basics and then moving on to some cool mythology and folklore. So even if you're interested in more of the folklore aspect, this has a little bit for everybody. So don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to see upcoming videos. And House Dang King Song, the Managansh Kingu. Bye.